Welcome to Financial Issues with Shanna Bird, where we join reality with truth, helping you to make the most of your money by honoring God with your investments. Now, here's your host, Shanna Bird.
Good Monday morning. It is Monday, May the 13th. We hope that you had a wonderful, wonderful Mother's Day weekend. And if after this great weekend, you're grateful for the children that you chose to give birth to, maybe you'll consider making a donation to Preborn Ministries to help other mothers choose life and experience the joys of motherhood that you have experienced. We know that it's not all a bed of roses. There's certainly heartaches and hard times in mothering children and fathering children for that matter as well.
Yep.
But, the scripture tells us that children are a blessing from the Lord. So, help other mothers to choose life by supporting Preborn Ministries. And here at Financial Issues, we are helping you defund darkness with our biblically responsible investment strategy and encouraging you to fund the light, to be a joyful and generous giver. So check out financialissues.org. Click on that Preborn banner. That's a great opportunity to exercise your stewardship muscles.
Yeah. Shannon, it's good to be on with you this morning. And you know what? I apologize preemptively because I'm going to have to ruin your Mother's Day with this headline that we got last week. This is really crazy. But to open our show, last week, CNN did a report. Apparently, President Biden falsely claimed in an interview that aired on CNN, actually, that inflation was 9% when he came into office, when it was actually at 1.4%. He said, quote, Shannon, no president has had the run we've had in terms of creating jobs and bringing down inflation. It was 9% when I came to the office. 9%. Then he went on to claim he's turned around the economy after the reporter pressed him about polls showing that voters trust Trump more than him to steward the nation's economy. I was blown away by this, Shanna. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, too.
Well, at first thought, well, maybe it's just a blunder if he just, said it once. He's been known to not quite know where he even is sometimes. But to reiterate and to say it 3 times, and what shocked me the most was that CNN actually pressed him on it. So making attempts at being, a legitimate news organization.
Right.
Well, Biden, he did. He turned the economy around. He did. I will confirm that. I will fact check that for you. But he turned it around from moving in the right direction to moving in the wrong direction. I mean, just since he's taken office, gas prices have skyrocketed from $2.39 to $3.64. Oh, that's then and now. But what about, y'all remember that summer when gas prices were $5 a gallon?
2022, right? That was brutal.
Yeah.
Brutal.
So gas prices went from $2.39 to up over $5. Now, he's taking victory laps on getting them back down to $3.64 after he's drained our strategic oil reserve and jeopardized our national security over it. But, it's all about the economy, stupid, right? And we have an election this year. Our debt, let's talk about that for a second. Our national debt was at $21.6 trillion, which is still ridiculous. Yeah. But it started at 21.6. Now we're approaching $35 trillion. And that number is increasing at $1 trillion every 3 months. And we've got a problem because we've got money coming due. We've got treasuries coming due. Interest rates, by the way, when he took office, were at 0.25%. That was the Fed funds rate. It now sits at 5.25%. That means that all of that debt that is coming due, that shorter term debt that we were only paying 0.25% on, now we're looking at paying, anywhere from 4.5% to over 5% to issue new debt. And that's just to keep from paying off our debt that we don't have the money to pay off. The budget deficit, well, let's talk about that. How well does he do in managing the money that's coming in? Well, the budget deficits in previous administrations prior to Biden, and it extends back even further to beyond Trump. But I looked at a chart, and there's like a little squiggly line. That's just how it goes because revenues come in at different time for the government. But the budget deficits stayed under $400 billion per quarter, which is still absolutely ridiculous, during previous administrations. But it's only the budget deficit. Now, the deficit is the difference between what comes in and what goes out, and that number's negative right now. So it's only been under $400 billion 3 out of 9 quarters that Biden has been in office. So, he takes victory laps and talks about how we have this really strong economy, yet the government is spending money like we're in a depression. He's intent on forgiving student loans that, by the way, nobody asked for forgiveness. This is an idea that he threw out there, my opinion, to win votes. And so yeah, he has definitely turned the economy around.
Absolutely. Boy, Shannon, isn't it such a good reminder that for us to have our ear to the ground and know what the truth really is? Because we have elected officials who are actually trying to tell us, bold-faced lies here. Like, there's a big difference between 9% and 1.4%, and there's a big difference between turning the economy around in the positive versus the negative, like you just said. There's a huge difference there, and we just have to know what this is here. Following the interview, it was interesting. CNN's John King warned that Biden is treading on very dangerous ground. Yeah, you think with these claims. King ended up saying the president risks offending voters that he's talked to in his travels over the last 6 to 7 months because they don't feel it. It seems like, Shanna, even Biden's voting constituency is starting to wonder, wait a second, if the economy's great, shouldn't I be feeling like the economy's great? Like, shouldn't my pocketbook be reflecting this? Shanna, why is it important for us to understand what's really going on here?
Well, because I think politicians on both sides manipulate the facts.
Yeah.
So they in this case, he outright lied about it. But, I think in today's world of social media, a lot of times people just take what they read, and if it sounds good to their itching ears, they run with it. They don't fact check. They don't consider for a minute, is it even true? And I think that lots of politicians bank on the fact that, we may not have really great memories, especially when it comes to economic data that, only a fraction of the population really follows closely.
Yeah.
But, I think it's like the CNN anchor told him, and I'm surprised because, the people that CNN talks to are probably not people who are probably people that are fans, or at least have been fans of Joe Biden at one time, and the leftist agenda. So it's interesting to hear that even the people that they're talking to are questioning that.
Yeah.
People just know that, if you look at the facts, cost of life today is 20% higher than it was when Joe Biden took office. And that's kind of in general. Inflation was running at 1.4% when he came into office. It got up to 9%. It wasn't 9%. 9%, the 9% peak came in the summer of 2022. Joe Biden took office in January of 2021. So, it's important to remember the facts and to know what's true and what's not.
And Shanna, this is just a kind of a final question to kind of wrap this up, but what can we learn from this administration with our own stewardship dollars? Because we've all given the opportunity to spend money well, and we see clearly here examples of how not to do it well. What can we learn from this?
Well, if we look at budget deficits, the government running $400 billion a quarter, we see that they're bringing in less money than what they're spending. We can't take our cues from that. We can't, the government acts like money grows on trees. It doesn't. We have to be responsible for our own financial health. We can't, probably students these days are looking to see what's happening with the government paying back money. And they think, well, I'll just go incur all these student loans and get it paid for as well. Can't use the government as an example.
Amen. Absolutely. Got more financial issues coming up here, folks. We got a good question coming on the other side of this, Shanna. I'm excited for it. We'll be back right after this break. Stick with us.
Sounds good.
The miracle of carrying a child creates a unique bond between a mother and her unborn baby. She feels the baby's movements and responds to their needs even before birth. Help create that bond between an abortion-minded mother and her unborn child by giving the gift of life through Preborn. During the month of May, you can bless your mom for Mother's Day by giving to Preborn on your mother's behalf. For $28, you can sponsor an ultrasound scan that will enable an abortion-minded woman to hear the heartbeat of her baby. 90% of the time, that sound will change a woman's mind and cause her to keep their baby. Give the gift of life to the woman that gave you life by sponsoring an ultrasound. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give. That's preborn.com/FISM. You can help an abortion-minded mother receive discipleship, encouragement, and the strength needed to have her baby.
There are moments in life that define us. Choices determine the courses we take. Choices that create life, or those that save a life. And some make life worthwhile. There are decisions to stay or to go, to remain the same or to grow. Sometimes we pray and make peace. Other times we take a stand for what we believe. In celebration, mourning, triumph, and defeat, we are invested in every decision we seek. Despite differences, we have one thing in common: the desire to do all for the glory of God. Keep your wallet aligned with your heart and your investments in harmony with your faith. Timothy Plan, biblically responsible mutual funds, ETFs, and retirement plans. Before investing, carefully consider a fund's investment objective, risks, charges, and expenses contained in the prospectus available at timothyplan.com. Read carefully before investing.
Welcome back to Financial Issues, folks. Good to be here with you today. Hey, want to remind you, we have a conference call coming up this Wednesday, May the 15th at noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Wednesday, May 15th, noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Now's a great time to become a partner, folks, because one of the benefits that you get is being able to join these conference calls where you get even more deeper information from Shanna, directly from Shanna, on the economy and on things with the ministry as well. It's a really, really good thing to be able to do. Of course, one of the other partner benefits is the ability to be able to ask Shanna your financial questions. And so sometimes we spend time on the conference calls answering these questions. Oftentimes we also do that on our live show. And Shanna, we got a doozy here from last week from Ethan in Missouri. You want to take a stab at this one?
Sure.
All right, let's do this. So Ethan from Missouri saying, with so many stocks on the sell list lately, it seems evident, at least to Ethan, that the FISM strategy is no longer long-term investing, and it's often buy high, sell low when the stock collapses. I've seen that too many times. It's really disappointing. What are your thoughts to Ethan's comments there, Shanna?
Well, I couldn't disagree more. We still do definitely have a long-term investing strategy. You know, there have been more sells on the list lately than normal, and there's good reason for that. More and more companies are falling off the wagon when it comes to biblically responsible investing. So if you go back and you look at a lot of the sells that have come out over the last, I would even say 2 years, many of them are for reasons that the company is no longer biblically responsible. And just like the most recent one, do we still have the 2 petitions open that people can sign?
We've still got the one open, Shanna. We got the petition for AMD right now, close to 400 signatures on it.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Yep.
So we're asking people to sign that. And, you know, there are some sells that we have issued for fundamental reasons. So, you know, things are... you know, we're sort of entering a new cycle in the market, and the market's really overvalued now. I think that it's going to be hard to see a really hard fall from here for any reason other than something major happens in the economy. But we're starting to see the labor market loosen up. We're starting to see inflation maybe start to rise back again. This is probably going to cause the Fed to delay rate cuts. I still think that they're going to do it before the election because they're going to probably succumb to political pressure.
I thought they were apolitical. No, wait, never mind.
Well, yeah, they are.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. That's the official word.
There you go. There you go.
They operate out of a preservation strategy too. If Jerome Powell wants to keep his job, he probably stands a better chance of doing that with a Biden presidency than with a Trump presidency. So, to Ethan's comments about buying high and selling low, you have to know going in, whenever you go into an investment strategy, you're not going to win all the time. There are going to be companies that do things. Things are going to change. Maybe things in their industry change. Maybe there are some company-specific things that happen. So we do have a long-term strategy with very low turnover in portfolios still. A lot of the stocks that have been on the sell list, and we've even said this when they've come out, have just been on the broad list. They haven't actually been on the buy list at all. But we decided to issue sells on some of them because we know that either, out of error, just partners not really understanding the strategy, maybe have bought some things off of the broad list, or there have been some partners who have bought off of the broad list even knowing that they shouldn't have. So, we've issued some companies we've decided it's not a good idea to follow anymore. There were things that were put on the broad list, and I can't totally speak for Dan, but I know even since Dan passed, there have been things that we've added to the broad list that looked interesting, but never became interesting enough to put on the buy list. But I was just a partner for a long time before I started co-hosting with Dan, and then eventually became the host of the program. So, and I manage accounts for a lot of people who had started the strategy on their own, decided that they just didn't have the time to do it, or maybe it became a little bit more complex than what they really thought they were capable of doing. So they hired my firm to manage the strategy for them. And so I've seen things, portfolios that have come in, things that I know, and even they admittedly said, yeah, well, it wasn't on the buy list when I bought it, but, I went ahead and did it anyway. So knowing that dynamic, there's some things that have never been on the buy list that we've issued sell orders for. But, we do have a long-term sort of buy. It's not really a buy and hold strategy. We end up holding things for a long time, but we're not ignoring them. It's not a buy and ignore strategy. If we see things happen in an industry or with a company, we're going to take action on that. So, the good news is you are your own portfolio manager. So you get to decide whether you take the advice or the guidance that we offer.
Yeah. Yes, Jenna, that's really well said. And just a couple things came to mind as you were talking. Two things I would love some more clarity from Ethan. And Ethan, if you're listening, perhaps you're listening on the chat, feel free to, share that. But one would be perhaps if you did buy something that was off of the broad list when it wasn't on the buy list. But then the second thing also would be, what is your long-term approach? I mean, the success of the strategy, Shanna, is based on being long-term. So if you go rogue, you might not have as much success with it because you're not following the long-term strategy. If you're only in it for a year or something, it might not be as successful for you. That's part of why we promote this long-term strategy, because that's what makes it successful, right?
Yeah, that reminds me. Yeah. It's a lot of times, when I'm talking with people in my practice and we come on, we talk about expectations, and we look at the market and we say, over the long term, the market has averaged, the S&P 500 has averaged 9% over a very long period of time, and then a year later, we're talking maybe we've had a negative year, and or maybe we've had a string of negative years, and the people will tend to say, well, we only made 6% last year. That doesn't sound like 9%, or we dropped 5% in 1 year. That's how am I going to make 9%? How am I going to average 9% with that? And what I would say is that you can't abandon a strategy that you look to employ for the next 10 years over a 2 or 3 year period.
Yep.
You can't if you think about this, if you hire a contractor and they say, well, it's going to take me 9 months to build your house, and 3 months in, you say, well, this isn't working. My house isn't finished. I'm going to fire you. You can't, it doesn't make any sense.
My roof's not on. What's going on?
My roof's
that's
not
exactly
on.
right.
Yeah,
or Shanna, what about in a marriage? What if after your first fight you just said, okay, this is bad. I'm going to get out of this. No, you're in it for life.
I think that's what some people do, though.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, you're in it for life. It's long term. So having that commitment is so important.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would say that the people that, take that short term approach and get out prematurely, whether we're talking about marriage or the markets or whatever, you aren't going to see those long-term, the fruit of that long-term strategy. You're not going to see the rewards of that if you don't wait it out. So, what do you want to do? If we see something that, we no longer think is going to be good, we're not telling you to sell it because we think it's going to have a bad 2 months. We're looking much longer term than that. And we're thinking, we want to try to help you avoid having something long term in your portfolio that doesn't meet the same criteria for when we added it. So.
Yeah, Shanna, that's really well said. The last thing that I'll say to Ethan's point here is you had mentioned earlier that we've issued some sell alerts over the last couple of years because of biblically responsible issues, and you had brought up the one with the AMD, and it was just a good reminder for us that there is one thing that's really important for us, and I think that would be building a long-term portfolio and seeing some return from it. But I would say, and I think you'd agree with me, what is even more important is honoring God. And so we will part ways with a company, even if that company's doing well. Like, I think I remember you saying AMD was financially doing great, but we're not going to be part of it because they're murdering babies with company money and they're promoting the LGBTQ agenda. There's some things that are more important.
And here's the real long term in this long term strategy. Yeah. We're talking 8 to 10 years. That's nothing when we look at eternity.
Yeah,
we're looking at 8 to 10 trillion plus years in eternity. So what we're choosing to do here, like you said, is to honor God. And that is more important than any financial return that we could ever have. So
Amen.
I think that's the real long-term part of our strategy.
It's well said, Ethan. That's a interesting question, and I know I really appreciate the conversation that it started. I'd encourage you to ask a follow-up if you've got them. Speaking of those questions, Shannon, I think we got time to get to one or two here before the end of this segment.
Okay, sounds good.
We've got Joanne, 64 years old, saying, I'm using Vanguard brokerage currently, and I became aware that they're charging me a $500 fee to do the tax filing on 2 of my energy stocks. I got E40, E89. In effect, they're taking 25% of my dividend earnings from these 2 stocks. Is this reason enough to sell these stocks and buy something else? The fee was $300 last year. What can I replace them with if I decide to sell them both? What do you think?
I'm not familiar with a brokerage company charging a fee to do a tax filing. Now, if it's held in an IRA account, they may be, withholding a tax or something like that. But what I would say is that both of those holdings that you mentioned, the E40 and the E89, are both yielding over 7%. So if the cost that they're taking is 25% of what you're getting in dividends, you're still netting 5.25%. So if you're an income investor and you're looking to replace that income and you do decide that you want to sell them, you have to find something with a 5% dividend or more. And I guess that's what, if it's your preference just to not have the headache of dealing with those things, then you're going to be looking for something that's yielding over 5%. And there are a couple of things on the buy list that you could choose to do that. It may not be in that same sector, because the other one that I can think of that is in that same sector, you're going to have the same issue with, because it's an MLP too. So you may have to overweight in a different sector if you want to do that and keep the income.
Good stuff there, Shannon. I think
we're at the end.
I think the end is coming here of this segment. Yep.
Well, good. Well, folks, if you listen on an outlet that only carries the short version of the show, we bid you a farewell. For the rest of you, hang around. We're going to be back with more financial issues after this break.
I started investing close to 30 years ago now. All that time, I had never heard anyone talk about setting up your portfolio in a way that glorifies God. When I first heard about it, I was listening to the radio, a show called Financial Issues. They were teaching people how to honor God with their money. I became a partner with Financial Issues, and it's been one of the best decisions I've made. Invest your money in a God-honoring way. Go to financialissues.org.
You know, folks, the bond between a mother and her child during pregnancy and childbirth lays the foundation for a lifelong connection characterized by love, nurturing, and mutual support. And we're asking you to help us create that bond between an abortion-minded mother and her child by giving life through Preborn, giving that gift of life. During the month of May, help us place 100 ultrasound machines that will save babies over and over and over again. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give. That's preborn.com/FISM. Throughout the month of May, FISM is partnering with Preborn to fund the light by providing 100 ultrasound machines to pro-life centers around the country. Now, how can you contribute? Well, for as little as $28, you can provide an ultrasound scan to an abortion-minded woman in crisis. And when that woman hears the heartbeat of her baby, she will choose life. Get this, 90% of the time. It's remarkable. And guess what? With the help of a donor match, for every 200 scans donated, that's for a net value of $5,600, Preborn Ministries will be gifted an ultrasound machine to place at a clinic in need. Each machine has the potential to impact hundreds of thousands of mothers' choices. Preborn also offers additional support to mothers in need and presents the gospel to every mother who comes into their clinics, knowing that salvation is the greatest gift that can be given to a mother and her child. So go to preborn.com/FISM to give. That's preborn.com/FISM.
Securities offered through G.A. Reppel & Company, a registered broker-dealer and investment advisor, member FINRA and SIPC. Opinions expressed by Shanna are hers alone and are for informational purposes only and do not necessarily represent those of G.A. Reppel or the outlet on which you are listening. You should consider how the information applies to your situation prior to personally implementing it and consult any financial professional you work with to make sure it's applicable to your financial plan.
Thanks for hanging with us here on Financial Issues, folks. Good to be here with you. I hope you enjoyed that conversation in the last segment there. I see at least one chat comment in there in response to it. Leo, please do share some more there. I had chatted in there for you. Just wondering if I could get a little more information. Leo just had some similar comments to what Ethan had. And so I'd love to be able to hear more about that. And really to know, Leo, if you're following that 8 to 10, really to 12, 15-year approach, or if you perhaps have just started, or if you are following more of the short-term approach, I'd love to be able to help you and try to steer you in the right direction to follow that long-term approach. Claude had a good comment there as well. Claude, we'll get to that if we have time also, but I want to just share a couple things for you, folks. Reminder, we got a conference call Wednesday. Make sure you join us at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, noon Central Time. Become a partner before then. You can get on that conference call. Go to financialissues.org and click Become a Partner today. That's the easiest way to do it for $132 a year. Many benefits, one of them being joining the conference calls. Also, folks, we're about halfway there, a little less than halfway there for our Preborn campaign, trying to raise that goal of 50 ultrasound machines. We're doing a great job so far. We've got 20 underwritten, but really now is full court press time. So if you have not given to Preborn yet, now is the time to do it. Go to financialissues.org, click that Preborn banner right there. It's the easiest way to give. I'll bet there are several listeners out there who can underwrite a machine today. Again, $5,600 a gift to preborn underwrites one ultrasound machine. Those machines go anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000, $25,000. So we have an anonymous donor who is helping to offset those costs and is also giving a generous gift to FISM. The total amount of money that we raise throughout the whole month of May, this donor will give that gift back to us at the ministry. So if you love FISM and you want to help us out, now's a great chance to do it by giving to Preborn. Go to preborn.org, or you can go to financialissues.org, click the Preborn banner. That'll take you right there. The markets, folks, they were mixed Friday. The Dow attempted to extend its longest winning streak of the year, 2024, to 8 days, and it succeeded. Dow finished about 1/3% positive, the S&P about 1/8% positive, and the NASDAQ was barely below the flat line. Oil finished under $79 a barrel at the close, and the 10-year Treasury yields finished right at kind of hanging around that 4.5% that we've been seeing. Right now, markets just opened up and everything is in positive territory. The Dow's looking to build up about 1/4%, the S&P up about 1/5, the NASDAQ up 1/3. Let's see here, U.S. 10-year Treasury continuing down a little bit, 4.47%. And oil is trading now still a little bit higher than it was at its closing numbers on Friday, but hanging right around $78.75 a barrel. So that's what oil's looking like right there. This week, folks, a couple things to be looking at in the economy here. So today we get a Fed panel that's actually taking place right now. Could have some impact on the markets for sure. Jerome Powell's not speaking today. However, he will be speaking tomorrow. We also get PPI for April. Wednesday is really the biggest day in terms of Fed numbers because we get CPI for April, and then we also get retail sales for April as well. Most of the eyes of the experts are going to be looking at those numbers as they do have the potential to move the needle significantly in terms of the Fed's interest rate cut expectations. That was especially after those odds ticked up recently following the Fed's latest monetary policy decision and favorable labor market data. We also get home builder confidence for May and business inventories for March. That home builder confidence number last month came just above the 50-point benchmark, so we'll see if it can stay above that. Thursday, we get initial jobless claims for last week. Several more Fed leaders will be speaking. Friday, same thing with at least one more Fed speak. And we get the leading economic indicators for April as well. Earnings season is running down here, though we do have a couple of big ones this week. Today, not really a lot of note. Tomorrow, we get Home Depot, Alibaba, and Sony, a couple others. And then Wednesday, nothing really big on Wednesday. Thursday, we get Walmart, Deere, and a couple other ones. It's definitely winding down a little bit. We have a couple more heavy hitters that are going to report, but nothing too heavy in terms of earnings season this week. Okay, so we got a chat question there. Good one from Claude asking, I wonder, under a Trump administration, would some woke companies decide to unwoke themselves? Claude, that's a good question. I said in the chat, I could see it going both ways, but I would lean towards thinking that those woke companies have been so heavily indoctrinated in their wokeism that they're probably going to stay woke. I certainly would pray against that, but you know, when people have been fools for a long time, they continue in their folly often. Usually it takes a lot to get someone out of their folly. So I could see that. Not only that, but also for many of these companies, if Trump wins the election, maybe they'll feel almost like a personal vendetta or a grudge to say, you know what, I'm going to be woke even more than I was before. I could see that being what happens. I pray that it doesn't. And, you know, maybe in terms of certain sectors, like I know we've seen, you know, Biden has had a heavy hand in the energy sector here because he's been very green and all that stuff. Trump would certainly lean a little bit more the other way. Perhaps that could impact some energy companies. But honestly, my opinion is that companies that are woke, they've been so heavily indoctrinated, and really what would change them is change at the company level. You know, so be a change in administration at that company level, change in corporate leadership, change in donors, things like that. But Claude, I certainly would pray that under a Trump administration that these woke companies would go back to just doing what they're supposed to do. Speaking of companies doing what they're supposed to do, that petition that we have with AMD, it's still active right now. We got almost 400 signatures. That's actually one way that we can at least have a chance to see woke companies going unwoke once again, is shareholders or former shareholders making your voice heard, saying we don't like what you're doing and we are going to sell unless you go back to doing what you're supposed to be doing. So if you want to sign that petition, you don't have to be a partner to do it. Go there right now, financialissues.org, and click sign the petition. And let's get to 400 signatures today. We'll be sending that petition over to the leaders over at AMD soon. But just wanted to remind you all of that. Claude, it's a good question there. Grant, we got another comment that came in from James. You want to tackle that one?
Yeah, we have a question from James, and illegals could be the new mission field. How many would reject the woke agenda if given a vote, albeit illegally, might support a Republican? Am I off base? What do you think, Seth?
That's a good question. You know, once again, James, I think you're thinking in the right way. Let's talk first about the mission field. So James is referring to illegal immigrants coming into this country in droves, and many of them are not Christians. And so we have a mission field coming right into our country here. Some people may think, wow, this is a great, wonderful thing. I think we have to think about it rightly. So illegals entering into the country is a new mission field, but does that justify illegal immigration? I don't think so. I don't think it does. I think it's wise for Christians to do what's right and to follow the laws and rules that have been set forth by our country, so far as those rules don't contradict the Word of God. I think having immigration laws is perfectly fine and a good thing within the Christian worldview. I think it's great, actually. Now, God can work through illegal immigration for his own glory, but it doesn't justify the illegal immigration. Think about it this way. In the same way that, we wouldn't applaud Joseph's brothers for selling him into slavery, even though God sovereignly used that for his glory. Some people would say, well, we should applaud the fact that they sold Joseph into slavery. That was a good thing in the end. It was a good thing in the end, but it did not justify their evil actions of doing something absolutely horrendous to their own flesh and blood, to their brother. God does as God pleases for his glory, but we need to live in obedience to him. And so illegally entering into the country is breaking the law. It's wrong. Now, I will say this. If you have an opportunity to preach the gospel to an illegal immigrant, a good thing to do would not be to say, nope, I'm not going to tell you about Jesus. Go back to your country, come back in the right way, and then I'll tell you about Jesus. I'm not advocating for that at all. If someone's in front of you who needs the gospel, you give them the gospel. But it doesn't justify the illegal way, the illicit way in which they enter this country, in which they do it, perhaps. James, I hope that makes sense there for that first question there. I know we're coming up on the ag report here, so we may need to hold off on the second question here. So we'll do that on the other side of this break. We got the ag report coming up here. It's a good question, James, and then we'll be back with more financial issues coming up. Here's Craig Halgard with today's ag report.
Strong demand and larger ending stocks. However, not as large as the trade was looking for, and so prices headed higher. At the close, July corn was 13 1/4 cents higher at 469 3/4. Soybeans received a generally bearish report as the world carryout to use ratio is at its greatest level in 6 years and the second highest in at least 15 years. But that didn't matter on Friday as soybeans followed corn and wheat higher. On the closing bell, July beans were up 10 1/2 cents at 12.19. Wheat received some friendly news with the USDA putting out production numbers that came in below expectations, while at the same time continuing to shrink world-ending stocks. Now this week, traders will be watching Russian crop conditions as they battle drought and freeze damage. Friday's close had Minneapolis July wheat 16 1/4 cents higher at 7.20. Kansas City rose by 21 1/2 cents to close at 6.73 1/4. Chicago was 26 cents higher at 6.63 1/2. Cotton futures reacted to the USDA report, which placed the USDA's final cotton production estimate at 12.07 million bales, reducing the old crop carryout total by 100,000 bales down to 2.4 million. Now for new crop, initial production is seen at 16 million bales, with stocks total building up to 3.7 million bales, and that was seen as bearish to the market. At the close, July futures were down 129 points at 77.31. Livestock futures were mixed. June live cattle were 20 cents higher at $176.50 15 cents per hundredweight, while August feeder cattle were 15 cents lower at $250.90 per hundred. June lean hog futures were 65 cents higher, $98.37.5 per hundredweight. Class 3 milk futures continued their amazing run higher. Now on April 3rd, we had June futures closing at $16.32. On Friday, June futures were up another 15 points as they closed at $20.51. It's been a big run in a fairly short amount of time. This has been Craig Haugaard with your Financial Issues Ag Update. We'll be right back with more financial issues after this.
The miracle of carrying a child creates a unique bond between a mother and her unborn baby. She feels the baby's movements and responds to their needs even before birth. Help create that bond between an abortion-minded mother and her unborn child by giving the gift of life through Preborn. During the month of May, you can bless your mom for Mother's Day by giving to Preborn on your mother's behalf. For $28, you can sponsor an ultrasound scan that will enable an abortion-minded woman to hear the heartbeat of her baby. 90% of the time, that sound will change a woman's mind and cause her to keep their baby. Give the gift of life to the woman that gave you life by sponsoring an ultrasound. Go to preborn.com/FISM to give. That's preborn.com/FISM. You can help an abortion-minded mother receive discipleship, encouragement, and the strength needed to have her baby.
I started investing close to 30 years ago now. All that time, I had never heard anyone talk about setting up your portfolio in a way that glorifies God. When I first heard about it, I was listening to the radio, a show called Financial Issues. They were teaching people how to honor God with their money. That made a lot of sense to me. I guard my heart, my mind. I watch my mouth, hoping to bring glory to God in everything I do and say. Well, why wouldn't I want to do the same with my money? I decided I wanted my portfolio to glorify God. I became a partner with Financial Issues, and it's been one of the best decisions I've made. I want to leave a legacy of godliness for those who are following in my footsteps. Invest your money in a God-honoring way. Go to financialissues.org.
The opinions and recommendations expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the opinions of the station or any of the program sponsors. Additionally, all products or services offered by the program sponsors may not be known by the program.
Folks, we have a great Dan clip to get to here, but before we do, I did want to finish with James' question. It's a good one. He asked in the last segment there that, you know, illegal immigrants could be a new mission field. Is he off base with that? We talked about that a little bit. The second question was many might reject the woke agenda if given a vote illegally and might support a Republican. Could happen, James, for sure. Your second question. But still, I think it's good enough for us to see what's happening here, that there is one side who is actively trying to allow illegal immigrants to enter, knowing that if they promise free stuff, there's a chance that the illegals could vote for that. Now, Sam Case just made a great point. We were talking off the air there, and he was saying that many of these illegals are coming from, is it Venezuela, right, Sam? Many of them coming from Venezuela.
Yeah, there's a good portion of them coming from Venezuela, which is a country, as we know, ravaged by communism. So I do wonder if a chunk of them, if given the opportunity, would rather support, you know, freedom-loving Republicans than Democrats. But I think you're on point to know that Democrats are actively courting these people, so they probably have a different agenda than what I'm thinking in an ideal world here.
Absolutely. It would be nice if, like, they were fleeing from these countries saying, yeah, you know what, I don't like that. I want to come to a country that's free from that. Now they're coming to a country that's becoming more and more like those communist countries, which is sad. But I do think it's worth just thinking about the fact that many of these illegals will probably vote for those who want them in the country versus those who are promising to close the border and get them out of the country. For example, we saw recently there was a news headline. Trump said he wants to do a mass deportation, right thing to do, making sure that people come into the country illegally and that we're not inviting terrorists into this country. But that probably will give him a negative will make these certain types of people negatively inclined towards him, basically. Now, this is a stewardship issue, James. You know, I think it's good for us to seek to have those in power who are going to defend our nation's borders, but we also have to be good stewards of the gospel. So I'll go back to your first question there. We always have to be ready to preach the gospel. And so if you come across someone who you know is an illegal immigrant and you know they need Jesus, tell them about Jesus. Tell them about Jesus. Certainly, if the conversation comes to upholding the law and obeying the law, that's absolutely part of it. But yeah, give them the gospel. I mean, what they need more than anything else is to know and love Jesus Christ. And so you have the opportunity as a Christian to give them that, to be a good steward of the gospel. So James, it's a great question there, and I appreciate you asking it. All right, folks, with the time that we have left here, I'd love to hear some wisdom from our founder, Dan Celia. We talk a lot about the Federal Reserve. This week is glutted with Fed speeches, so it's helpful for us to remember why it exists, who it's accountable to. Dan gives some great insight here to close our show. Here is Dan Celia with the idea of the accountability of the Federal Reserve. Here he is.
The Federal Reserve is not a federal agency, right? It's a separate organization. It's a private entity. It was set up in 1913 after a depression that was far worse than the Great Depression, which happened in around 1903. And one of the things that the government came to realize was there's a huge problem with the monetary system. And they helped establish a private organization called the Federal Reserve. Very conveniently, they put the word federal in there to give it instant credibility, and maybe for some other deceptive reasons. But the Federal Reserve is the window of which every bank in the country goes to get money. So banks, who do banks borrow money from? They don't borrow money from a bank. They are a bank. They get money from the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve has been given the charge of our monetary system. When they were originally established, this is one of the things that irks me more than anything I ever watch on television with the government, but that's just because of the way I'm wired about economics. But the Federal Reserve was established as a private entity, but accountable and reportable to the government. They were accountable to Congress for everything that they did. And the goal was that if the Congress said jump, they said how high. And my pet peeve is when they give testimony to Congress as if Congress works for them. Drives me nuts. And you have congressmen who don't even know anything about the Federal Reserve, and they treat the Federal Reserve. I remember the big joke. I don't know if you remember, if you've been following for a while, you do. But Ron Paul, not Rand Paul, his dad, Ron Paul, wanted to audit the Federal Reserve. You remember that? It was a big deal. And he demanded that the Federal Reserve be audited. And the Federal Reserve basically said, no, you're not going to audit us. As if they could say that. Now, what Congress and Ron Paul should have done, which he didn't have the power to do himself, should have said, okay, auditing firm ABC, get in there. We want to know every single thing the Federal Reserve is doing. Please audit that and get back to us. You don't ask the Federal Reserve. You think the SEC ever asked me if they could come in and audit when I had my trust company? No. I didn't ask for permission. They told me they were showing up for an audit. The Federal Reserve's accountable to Congress. And when Ron Paul was asking for permission or trying to get the Federal Reserve audited, it was such a joke. Ron Paul knew it was a joke too. I mean, we were on the same page there, but there shouldn't have been any question of accountability. They are given the responsibility to manage our monetary system. Now, I'll tell you what I disagreed with Ron Paul greatly. He wanted to abolish the Federal Reserve and let Congress handle it. Congress. These are guys that can't even manage their lunch money. And Ron Paul wanted to give them control, give the Congress control of our monetary system. Can you imagine that? It would have been a nightmare. But anyway, I was not for that. But I was for the notion that they should have been audited, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the Federal Reserve gave billions and billions of dollars to international banking systems. They don't have the authority to do that. They finally agreed to a partial audit. You can't audit everything. You just audit what we can tell you to audit. And it was determined that they did lend about $3.5 billion to various international agencies. Well, then that spurred a Freedom of Information Act, and it ended up being about $7.2 trillion. I believe it was more like 14. But they had no right to do that. They shouldn't have done that. They don't work for anybody else. They don't have a responsibility to help any other central bank. They are the central bank for the American monetary system. Shouldn't have done that. Did they? I don't even think they got their hand slapped. It was irrelevant to everybody. So they are where every bank in the country goes to borrow money. They charge the bank the Federal Reserve rate. That's what that rate is that we hear they're going to raise, right? Or not raise or cut or whatever. That's the Federal Reserve rate. So they lend money. They've been doing it since 1913. Think about that. Since 1913, through 14% years, 18% years, 17% years. Yes, on average, 4.5% years before the Carter years. They've amassed trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars sitting there. It's their money. That's what they've earned. So they have a lot of money. They have lots of money. Now they are amassing debt. I believe they've got to have somewhere between 12 and $15 trillion worth of our debt. They say 7.2. It's way more than that. Every 10 months, they add another trillion. Every 10 months right now. Just in what we know about, they're adding another $1 trillion. We're no longer on a gold standard, right? So how does money have any value? We print it and put it in circulation. Not really. We can't just print it and put it in circulation. We have to monetize it. In other words, we've got to make it worth something. The only way we can make it worth something is to sell it. So we issue debt, bonds, savings bonds, all kinds of debt, and we sell it to whoever will buy it. That immediately puts a value on it, and we get to put it in circulation. That's monetizing our debt. We have to we can't just print it. We've got to monetize it.
Folks, hope that was enjoyable for you there. That classic Dan clip, true as ever, as true as it was when Dan said it, and it's true today as well. You know, folks, this is why you need a good long-term strategy. I believe that's your best defense against whatever chaos the markets will do that's impacted by whatever the Fed does. That is your best defense against it. And so that's what we offer for you here at the ministry, is that $132 a year partnership. You will get that and so much more. Folks, consider making a gift today to Preborn as well. Preborn.com/FISM, or go to financialissues.org and click on the Preborn banner. Let's save babies together for the month of May. Thank you all so much to those of you who have given. Let's keep on pushing forward with this. Good to be here today with you, folks. God willing, we'll do it again tomorrow. Shanna will be on. I'll be here with you, unless the Lord tarries, of course. But until then, let's remember everything we have belongs to Him. So let's be found good and faithful stewards with it. God bless you all, and we'll see you tomorrow for more Financial Issues.
If we ever forget that we're one nation under God, then we will be a nation gone under.
Thank you for joining us. This has been an FISM production.